December 16th, etusinde, onihundrede, of Ofure, Ardennes forest. The trees stood silent, heavy with snow, their branches sagging under the weight of winter and war. For the German soldiers of the 326th Volksgrenadier Division, this morning was supposed to mark triumph. The opening strike of Hitler's last great gamble. Fog rolled low across the frozen ground, concealing tanks, whispering boots, and whispered prayers. They had survived the Eastern Front. They had stared into the face of the Red Army and lived. They thought they knew the sound of war, the shriek of artillery, the whistle before impact, the familiar logic of death that followed rules they understood. But that morning, the rules broke. When American guns began to answer, the shells didn't strike the earth. They vanished midair. And then came the rain. A storm of shrapnel fell from the sky, cutting through branches, uniforms, and bone alike. Foxholes became coffins. Men screamed not from wounds, but from confusion. It felt as though every shell could see them, as if the sky itself had turned against them. War had changed. And no one, not even the scientists who created it, could fully grasp what had just been unleashed. Colonel Oscar Axelson knew the front was collapsing. His artillery group, the 406th, was watching the German tide swallow the forests of Monschau. Reports came in. The 38th Cavalry Squadron was breaking, radio lines going silent one by one. If they fell, the entire sector would be gone by nightfall. In the command dugout, under the pale light of a flickering lamp, Axelson stared at the crates stacked along the wall. They were marked with a single cryptic code, VT. He knew what they were, and he knew he wasn't supposed to use them. These were not ordinary shells. Inside their metal casings lay a device that most scientists considered impossible. A radar system small enough to fit inside the nose of a cannon shell. A weapon so secret it was guarded like the atomic bomb itself. Headquarters had ordered, never fire it over land. If one failed to explode, the enemy could recover it, copy it, and turn the sky itself against Allied bombers. But Axelson was out of choices. He looked at his men tired, cold, their faces ghostly pale under the weight of defeat. He thought of the maps, the broken lines, the reports that whispered, "We're surrounded." Then he gave the order that would break every rule of Allied command and change the very nature of warfare forever. Load the VT shells. Moments later, the guns thundered. And in that instant, the world of 19th century artillery died forever. For centuries, artillery ruled the battlefield, but it was also its own worst enemy. A shell's power meant nothing if it detonated at the wrong moment. Too early, and the fragments scattered harmlessly in the air. Too late, and the blast buried itself in mud and snow. The most common fuse, the time fuse, was a mechanical clockwork timer. Each gun crew had to guess the range, estimate wind, altitude, and velocity, then set a tiny dial on the shell's nose, all in less than 30 seconds. It was precision by instinct, mathematics under fire. Even the best crews failed more often than they succeeded. Out of 5 shells fired, only 1 exploded where it could truly kill. The rest wasted their fury on the earth itself, digging holes, shaking trees, but sparing the men hiding just a few feet below. In the frozen Ardennes, that rule still held. German infantry knew that if they hugged the ground, the storm would pass above them. It was a deadly game of timing and luck. Until now. The shells that Colonel Axelson had just unleashed played by no such rules. They didn't guess. They knew. While men fought and froze in Europe, another kind of battle was being waged. In a small, unmarked building in Silver Spring, Maryland. It wasn't a laboratory in the traditional sense. No marble floors, no grand halls. Just a converted used car dealership. Its windows covered, its workers sworn to silence. Here, a group of civilian scientists, led by physicist Merle Tuve, was tasked with solving an impossible problem. Build a radar small enough to fit inside an artillery shell, and tough enough to survive being fired from one. Every physicist in the building knew the stakes. Each shell would face forces beyond imagination. 20,000 times the pull of gravity, venti sink, 0 rotations per minute, and searing heat that could melt steel. Every prototype they built shattered on the first test. The vacuum tubes, delicate glass hearts of the system, turned to dust the moment the gun fired. Failure after failure. Hundreds of tests, thousands of fragments. But they refused to quit. They wrapped the tubes in rubber and wax, redesigned the filaments like suspension bridges, and reinvented the tiny world inside each fuse. A young scientist named James Van Allen, the same man who would later discover Earth's radiation belts, created a tube so small and strong it could survive the hell of a cannon's breath. Then came the question of power. How do you charge a radio with no battery? Their answer was elegant and terrifying. Inside each shell, a tiny glass ampule held a sleeping liquid. The instant the shell was fired, the crushing G-force shattered the glass, awakening the battery inside. It lived for only a few seconds, just long enough for the shell to fly, search, and decide the perfect moment to kill. For the first time in history, a weapon could think. The order had been given. Load the VT shells. In the frozen woods near Monschau, the silence before the first shot was unbearable. Men could hear their own breath crystallizing. Some thought it would be their last. Then thunder. The American artillery opened fire, their shells screaming into the white sky. But something strange happened. There were no craters, no showers of dirt or flame. Instead, the explosions bloomed in the air. Sharp, perfect, almost surgical. Each burst created a storm of steel that rained down evenly, slicing through the forest like invisible razors. German infantry, trained to dive for cover, found no safety anywhere. Even those buried deep in foxholes were shredded by metal falling from above. They called it the artillery that could see. It was as if every shell had eyes, as if the Americans had found a way to weaponize the sky itself. Panic rippled through the 326th Volksgrenadier Division. Veterans, who had survived the Eastern Front, now trembled like new recruits. They didn't understand. They couldn't fight back. Within minutes, entire platoons were erased. Axelson's gamble had worked, and the Battle of the Bulge would never be the same again. Colonel Axelson's decision had saved his men, but it had also broken the rules. The proximity fuse was one of America's most guarded secrets, second only to the atomic bomb. Its use on land was forbidden. The fear was simple. If a single dud shell fell into German hands, they could reverse engineer it and use it to slaughter Allied bombers by the thousands. When word of Axelson's unauthorized miracle reached headquarters, it raced up the chain of command. He faced court-martial, maybe even prison. But the reports from the front were undeniable. Entire German divisions had been erased in hours. A line that was collapsing had suddenly turned solid again. The Battle of the Bulge was spiraling out of control. American forces were being pushed back across an 85-mile front. Eisenhower's headquarters buzzed with panic and disbelief. Could they risk exposing the secret to save the Western Front? On December 19th, 1944, Dwight D. Eisenhower made his choice. He ordered the fuse released. Everywhere, across every gun, the secrecy was over. The weapon was now official. Within days, convoys thundered across icy roads, hauling crates marked only VT, to the desperate artillery units in Belgium and France. Each box carried a secret, so powerful, it could turn a losing war into an unstoppable storm. Bastogne, a name that would be carved into history. December 21st, 1944. The 101st Airborne Division was surrounded, cut off, outnumbered, low on food, ammunition, and hope. The snow fell silently over the town, burying the bodies of the fallen, and muffling the thunder of distant guns. The Germans demanded surrender. General McAuliffe replied with a single word: nuts. It was defiance, but also desperation. The paratroopers were running out of everything except artillery. In the outskirts of town, the 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion was preparing its 75mm pack howitzers. Beside them lay the newest shipment, wooden crates stamped VT. When the German assault began at dawn, waves of gray uniforms surged across the white fields. They advanced in perfect formations, just as their manuals had taught them. But this time, the sky itself was waiting. The first shells burst not on the ground, but in the air, 100 feet above the Germans. Each explosion created a floating storm of steel, fragments slicing down at lethal angles. Soldiers dropped where they stood. Foxholes became death traps. The forest echoed with screams and metal. One American observer wrote, "It was like watching the hand of God sweep the field clean." Within minutes, The attack disintegrated into chaos. German prisoners later said they had never experienced such terror. Artillery that didn't miss, death that came from above. At Bastogne, the proximity fuse had proven itself, not in theory, but in blood. Christmas night, 1944. The Ardennes slept under fog and frost. But near the Sour River, a column of German infantry was on the move. Quiet, confident, unseen. They believed the mist would protect them. It always had. American spotters couldn't see through the fog. In any other battle, the crossing would have gone unnoticed, and the river would have run red by morning. But this was no ordinary night. Nearby, General George S. Patton and his Third Army were pushing north to relieve Bastogne. His forward observers caught a faint sound, boots in water, the soft rhythm of oars. Then came Patton's command. Fire, all batteries. The American guns awoke the night. Shells streaked through the dark sky, their fuses listening, searching, sensing. They didn't need to see. They only needed to know. As each shell passed over the river, its tiny radar detected the surface below, and the men crossing it. One by one, the fuses triggered. What followed was beyond human scale. Explosions hung in the fog, flashes reflecting on ice and blood. The river itself seemed to catch fire. There was no cover, no direction to run. When morning came, American patrols found the frozen bodies. Rows upon rows, 702 dead in all. An entire German battalion, erased in minutes. Patton wrote in his diary that night, "This was not battle. This was extermination." The fuse had become something more than a weapon. It was intelligence, cold, absolute, and merciless. For the Germans, the Ardennes had always been a friend. Dense forests, perfect cover from Allied planes, a place where tanks could vanish, where soldiers could regroup unseen. But in December 1944, the forest turned against them. The proximity fuse, that tiny radar brain, had rewritten the laws of survival. American artillerymen learned a new trick. Aim not at the ground, but at the trees. When the shell burst above the canopy, the effect was beyond comprehension. The first blast sent razor-sharp steel down in a cone of death, but that was only the beginning. The shockwave shredded the frozen branches, turning every limb, every splinter, into a secondary storm of jagged wood. Thousands of fragments, as long as a man's arm, shot outward at the speed of sound. Every tree became a weapon, every shadow a trap. German soldiers who had spent years learning to fight under forest cover now found themselves in the most dangerous place imaginable, beneath it. Taking shelter under a trunk was suicide. Digging a foxhole under roots was worse. The air itself seemed alive, screaming, whirling, cutting. An entire company could vanish from a single shell fired at the right height. Those who survived described it as a storm that fell from heaven, but it wasn't heaven. It was the cold precision of science, raining death from above. By January 1945, the Battle of the Bulge was over. The last gamble of the Reich had failed. Germany had thrown everything it had, men, tanks, pride, and desperation, into the snow of the Ardennes, and it had been broken. The reason wasn't courage. It wasn't tactics. It was mathematics. In those frozen forests, America had revealed the future of warfare, a future where equations replaced instinct and inventions replaced heroism. The proximity fuse had turned artillery from a blunt instrument into a thinking weapon. It didn't aim for bravery. It aimed for efficiency. German commanders were stunned. Field Marshal von Rundstedt called it decisive. General Hasso von Manteuffel confessed, "Our soldiers feared the artillery more than the tanks." And for good reason. On Elsenborn Ridge, 2 American divisions fired 160,000 shells in 3 days. Only a quarter of them used the proximity fuse. But those shells caused over 60% of the casualties. The math was clear. Science had become deadlier than any general. In the end, Germany wasn't defeated by bravery or bombs, but by a circuit the size of a man's thumb. A spark of genius born in a Maryland garage, forged by thousands of anonymous hands. In American factories that never slept. Those same innovations, miniature vacuum tubes, precise quality control, and rugged design, would go on to power satellites, computers, and the first generation of smart weapons. The fuse that could think became the ancestor of every guided missile, every Rather lock, Every drone that hunts from the sky today, what began as a desperate act of defiance in a frozen forest, became the foundation of an entire technological age. The German soldiers who died in those woods did not yet understand what they faced. They were the first victims of a new kind of war. A war not of men, but of minds.